Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, Kwasi Kwarteng has been sacked as Chancellor and replaced by Jeremy Hunt. And in yet another U-turn, Prime Minister Liz Truss has announced in a news conference a corporation tax will rise as part of an effort to reassure markets. Moving to Donegal, the oldest victim of the Donegal petrol station explosion has been laid to rest today. 9 others lost their lives in the blast, and our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie will be live. As always, give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. First of all,
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says she isn't resigning. That as she announced to the nation her decision to make yet another mini-budget U-turn.
I have acted decisively today because my priority is ensuring our country's economic stability. As Prime Minister, I will always act in the national interest. This is always my first consideration. I want to be honest. This is difficult. But we will get through this storm, and we will deliver the strong and sustained growth that can transform the prosperity of our country for generations to come.
Liz Truss speaking just moments earlier. Royal Mail says it's planning to make up to 6,000 people redundant by next August after announcing losses of more than £200 million. The company says it's started notifying workers of its plan, which aims to reduce its overall headcount by a total of 10,000. Royal Mail expects its full-year losses to hit £350 million. Detectives say the prime suspect in the murder of a woman who went missing 3 years ago in Milton Keynes has killed himself. 19-year-old Leah Croucher was last seen in February 2019. CCTV footage of her walking to work was shown. Thames Valley Police launched a murder inquiry after finding human remains and personal items belonging to Leah in a house following a tip-off from the public. The suspect, Neil Maxwell, was said to have been working at the property whilst the owners were away. The police say he killed himself in April 2019. Ian Russell, the father of the 14-year-old who ended her life after viewing suicide content online, has urged social media companies not to drag their feet. It comes after a coroner in the Molly Russell inquest recommended platforms be required to do more to protect children online, including separate platforms for adults and children. Instagram's parent company Meta has said it supports more regulation of social media and is committed to making Instagram a safe and positive experience for everyone. Climate activists have been arrested after throwing soup at one of Vincent van Gogh's most famous paintings in a protest against fossil fuels. The Just Stop Oil protesters threw tomato soup at the Sunflowers masterpiece hanging in the National Gallery in London this morning. The Met Police says they then glued themselves to a wall. The force said the painting hasn't been damaged. Ukraine's president has accused the International Committee of the Red Cross of inaction in upholding the rights of Ukrainian prisoners of war. The criticism comes following the death of more than 50 Ukrainian prisoners of war in July, many of them from the Azov regiment, at an explosion at the Olenivka camp in Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. Both sides have blamed each other for the blast. The Red Cross has previously tried and failed to obtain access to the camp. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the Red Cross must try again.
There is Avlenica, in fact, a concentration camp where our prisoners of war are kept. Access to them must be provided, as it was agreed. The Red Cross can make it happen, but you have to try to make it happen. Ukraine is ready to facilitate this. The mission of the Red Cross can work based on the example of the IAEA mission, but it requires leadership. Conscientiousness is required.
In the US, 5 people, including an off-duty police officer, have been shot dead in North Carolina. The shooting happened in Raleigh, near a popular trail that runs through part of the city. At least 2 other people, including another police officer, were wounded. Police say the suspect's a 15-year-old boy in a critical condition in hospital. The city's mayor, Mary Ann Baldwin, said terror has reached Raleigh's doorstep.
We have to end this mindless gun violence that is happening in our country. We have work to do, but there are too many victims. And so we have to wake up. I don't want other mayors standing here at the podium with their hearts breaking because people in their community died today, needlessly and tragically.
And thousands of people across Australia's southeast have been told to leave their homes after 2 days of heavy rain has caused flash flooding. Large parts of Victoria, southern New South Wales and parts of Tasmania saw more than a month's worth of rain fall over the last 48 hours. The heavy rain is expected to ease, but officials are warning flooding could continue through the weekend. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to the briefing with Arlene Foster.
Well, welcome to the briefing, and it's been quite the day. Jeremy Hunt is the new Chancellor after Liz Truss dramatically sacked Kwasi Kwarteng this lunchtime. And in a news conference a short while ago, the Prime Minister confirmed that corporation tax will rise in yet another U-turn. Kwarteng, Liz Truss's strongest ally, has lost his job only 38 days after being appointed. There has been growing pressures mounting on the government to reverse the mini-budget. And in his letter of resignation, he said, "You have asked me to stand aside as your Chancellor. I have accepted." It goes on, "It is important as we move forward to emphasise your government's commitment to fiscal discipline." Liz Truss, in her letter to her long-standing ally, states she is sorry to lose him as Chancellor, adding that "you have put the national interest first." Labour's shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has released a statement. It says, "A humiliating U-turn is necessary, but the real damage has already been done to millions of ordinary people now paying much higher mortgages and struggling to make ends meet. This is a Tory crisis made in Downing Street. They have plunged our economy into chaos and crisis with Truss's discredited trickle-down approach. It won't be forgiven or forgotten." Well, I'm delighted to say Business and Economics editor Liam Halligan is here with me. Liam, it's been quite the day. We knew that the markets were pricing in the corporation tax decision, which we've just heard from the Prime Minister. But that has a huge impact on businesses right across the country because they would have been planning in a different way for it.
Amidst the political drama, Arlene, I was careful to make the point, and Alistair very graciously let me make the point that for tens of thousands of small businesses across the country, this political parlour game has led to a disastrous outcome. They were relying on corporation tax staying where it was at 19%. Instead, it's going up to 25%. Yeah. Small businesses in particular in this country operate on very, very tight margins, and they've just had 6% wiped off their bottom line, which in many cases is their entire profit that their family live off and which they reinvest in. And coming out of the back of COVID lockdown, which of course hammered many small businesses, it wasn't the big supermarkets closed down, was it? It was the corner shops closed down. Many fast food restaurants, family-run businesses. There will be a lot of very, very worried people tonight. So I think we should make that point here on GB News loud and clear, because I don't think it's a good idea that corporation tax is about to go up from one of the lowest in the OECD advanced countries here in the UK to one of the highest.
Yeah. And you will know, Liam, my next-door neighbour in the Republic of Ireland sets corporation tax at 12.5%. And they do that for a reason. It brings in lots of foreign direct investment.
And they've been very successful.
And they've been hugely successful. And, I mean, we in Northern Ireland at one point in time wanted to have that parity, if you like. And we spent a long time arguing for that because we believed that a low rate of corporation tax would bring growth.
And you're about to have a rate of corporation tax, Arlene, and I say this as somebody who really wants Northern Ireland to prosper, as you know, that's double what it is in the Republic of Ireland.
Correct.
Which is a real deal breaker if you're thinking you want to invest on the island of Ireland. There's so many good reasons, vibrant people, very great levels of education in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, we can both agree. And yet in one part of the island of Ireland, obviously a separate country, the rate of corporation tax is double what it is in the other. And the other thing I wanted to say on this kind of economic and business theme, amidst the political drama which we're rightly covering, is that I've been saying throughout the afternoon that the real story isn't just what's happening in Downing Street and the theatrics of various people taking high offices of state and being deposed and so on. The real story in terms of financial stability is in the bond markets, because today is also the day. Now the Chancellor has gone and the Prime Minister has retreated from some of her tax policies. The bond markets also want to see the Bank of England carrying on with its emergency measures to support the market for government debt, the so-called 10-year gilt market. A gilt is just another name for a government bond. When you lend the government money, you get a bit of paper called a gilt that pays you a rate of interest, and then you get your money back. Now, I'm looking at this. It doesn't make pretty reading. It's moving all the time. But in the last hour or so, the 10-year gilt yield has gone up quite a lot. And so I'm concerned that the market is now pushing to see if the Bank of England is going to really end that emergency support, or if they're going to come back in and try and get that gilt yield back under control, because that is the borrowing cost, Arlene, that is the benchmark for all other borrowing costs across the economy, whether you're remortgaging, whether you're going to get a personal loan, whether you're a company that's taken out finance in order to buy some new machinery, build a new factory, or whatever it is. So I'm the last person in the world, and I know you are, to not be interested in politics. How ironic is that? Yeah. But we have to keep an eye on what this means for the broader country, and in particular, the business community.
And it's interesting you say that because, of course, some people will see the new Chancellor as someone who has been put in there to settle the markets down. Now, Jeremy Hunt, as we all know, avid Remainer, someone who argued very heavily for lockdown, and somebody who's seen as a globalist as well, very much so. Do you think he will settle the markets down?
Not if him being there leads to more parliamentary and political pyrotechnics to use. And I think he will be an incendiary figure. Yeah. I say that as somebody who knows Jeremy Hunt, respects him. He's a very successful businessman. He's an extremely accomplished man. But he is not, a person who unifies the Conservative Party by any means. I mean, let's just think about you know more about Parliament. You've forgotten more about Parliament than I'll ever know, Arlene. But let me just make this observation, which won't be lost on you. It was the European Research Group the Eurosceptic part of the Conservative Party who put Liz Truss in office, basically. Yeah. They are a big bloc that operate in Parliament. People like Steve Baker, who's now Minister, of course, in the Northern Ireland office. People like John Redwood.
Mark Francois.
Mark Francois.
Like
a lot of GB News viewers and listeners will be familiar with these characters and admire them to some degree. They crowned Liz Truss.
Yeah.
She is Prime Minister because of them. And she's now... And Kwasi Kwarteng is indeed... was a Brexiteer as well. Liz Truss, in a moment of kind of desperation to try and stabilise the ship, have just gone... She's just appointed to the second most powerful position in this country's political class, their nemesis.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hunt, who was as near to the sort of Lib Dems and the Labour Party sort of reversing Brexit, if possible, as it was possible to be within the Conservative Party, very much from that wing. And I really do fear... Alan Duncan, early on, former MP, former minister, he accused people of Brexit sort of McCarthyism, Brexiteers always saying that everything that Remainers do is about wanting to try and reverse Brexit. I do think a lot of the parliamentary party will start to get concerned that Jeremy Hunt will use this very powerful position to try and pick apart the settled will on Brexit. And that sounds crazy to me, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if many members of the ERG, people I know quite well and I know you do, were thinking along those lines. So hopefully Jeremy Hunt will settle the ship. I certainly want him to. We're all sick and tired of this turbulence, but I worry that politically he's actually going to be potentially quite destabilising.
And I have to say as well, Liam, for people like the ERG who thought that they were moving in a particular direction, it looks as if some senior people within the Conservative Party have lobbied to get Jeremy Hunt into this position. What does that say about Liz Truss's moving forward now and her growth strategy that she wanted to promote?
I think for that sort of One Nation Tory reform group branch of the Conservative Party, the kind of soft left of the Conservative Party, the kind of people who, in a rather derogatory fashion, Margaret Thatcher in the early 80s would have called wets rather than dries. I think for that part of the Conservative Party, an extremely respectable, legitimate part of the Conservative tradition, that kind of One Nation Toryism, I think for them this is about planting a massive flag, a big tank on Liz Truss's lawn, if you like, moving their queen deep into Liz Truss's territory, to use a chess analogy. And again, that's why I think it could be quite destabilising. And it strikes me that behind the scenes, Liz Truss was actually quite desperate. She had to cede a lot of ground within her own party. And to drill down into your question, Arlene, what does it mean for her growth strategy? Well, it strikes me that quite a bit of her growth strategy is still left, certainly on the tax side. The big planks of it were to lower the rate of national insurance, which Rishi Sunak increased. That's the really big ticket item. That's tens of billions of pounds. That's staying. Also, she hasn't conceded yet, but she hasn't conceded on lowering the basic rate of income tax from 20 to 19% next year rather than the year after, which Rishi Sunak wanted to do. Again, that's a big ticket item. That's sort of £7 or £8 billion. And, of course, there's the energy price cap, which will cost lots of money. So she's lost two parts, the top rate of tax and then the corporation tax freeze, which are the most eye-catching parts. But in terms of the money and the arithmetic, most of her tax measures are still in place. Now, the really important part of her growth strategy for me is what we call the supply-side policies, trying to make the planning system more efficient, trying to get rid of some regulations which big businesses like because they stymie small businesses.
Sure.
This kind of stuff is very, very contentious politically. It's very, very difficult to get through Parliament. And that's the part of the growth strategy I fear for, because you need parliamentary strength to get that business through. I don't think Labour's going to do her any favours at all, and certainly not the Lib Dems. So I think we may already have reached the peak in terms of her growth strategy with her hanging on to some of her tax policies, because the more nitty-gritty legislation to try and make the economy move more quickly and more commercially friendly, I think she will really, really struggle now, given the ground that she ceded by making Jeremy Hunt, no less, her Chancellor.
The great survivor, as I call him. He's back again.
He is. You've got to hand it to him.
You have to hand it to him, Liam. And I want to hand it to you because you've been in studio for quite a long time, so I'm going to let you go now. So Liam Halligan, our economics editor, who joined us there to bring us up to date with what's going on in the Treasury. So before I'm joined by GB News' political reporter, Arlene Foster, we're going to have a little package, and we'll be back with you very soon.
It is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are delivering our mission right now has to change. We need to act now to reassure the markets of our fiscal discipline. I have therefore decided to keep the increase in corporation tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year. It will act as a down payment on our full medium-term fiscal plan, which will be accompanied by a forecast from the independent OBR. We will do whatever is necessary to ensure debt is falling as a share of the economy in the medium term. We will control the size of the state to ensure that taxpayers' money is always well spent. Our public sector will become more efficient to deliver world-class services for the British people. And spending will grow less rapidly than previously planned.
So that was the Prime Minister at her press conference, which lasted all of 8 minutes earlier on today. I'm now joined by GB News political reporter Arlene Foster. Arlene, I'm going to show you the front page of the Daily Telegraph from today. Kwasi Kwarteng, I'm not going anywhere. Well, he's clearly gone.
Life comes at you fast, doesn't it? It's been the most astonishing day. We woke up, didn't we, hearing that he was on his way back from the IMF in Washington, unexpectedly early. Then we found out there was going to be a press conference. Then he's gone. Jeremy Hunt has been brought in. Chris Philp, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has gone to the Cabinet Office. Edward Agar has come in his place. They've done a job swap. But fundamentally, Liz Truss has got rid of her Chancellor to try to reset things, which are obviously going very, very badly for her at the moment. But I have to say, early days, obviously, but no indication that that is going to do it at all, because she and the Chancellor, as we all know, were inextricably linked. This was their joint mission to cut tax and go for growth. Really, I think his mini-budget, call it that, but I mean, it was 3 weeks ago today, anything but mini. The consequences have been very profound. But they agreed that together. They didn't run it by the Cabinet. They didn't consult. That was their joint baby. Now, parts of it are being ditched. The corporation tax rise, which is now going to go ahead, that keeping it low was one of their flagship policies. And the press conference was very short. The questions, only 4, were very brutal, but they all boiled down to the same question fundamentally, which is, why are you still here?
Well, I just wanted to bring that to a couple of those points together, because James Forsyth, writing in The Spectator just today at lunchtime, was saying that Truss and Kwarteng were even more of a joint political project than Cameron and Osborne. And the fact that he has been dismissed is a signal at just how bad things really are, Arlene. And I mean, how can she possibly remain, given that it was her plan to do all of those things?
I think it's extremely difficult, because clearly they were linked, they were a team, they were closer than any, really, for a very, very long time. So getting rid of him is not really going to solve anything. In fact, what it's done is it's enraged more people, because those people that thought that they were following the right policies, that they were on the right lines, that they just had to hold their nerve, are also now feeling very
She has no hinterland left, that's the point, because everybody's annoyed now.
She's basically managed to upset almost everybody. And I have to say, watching the press conference, she did look really completely friendless. I mean, she went to the Telegraph, she went to the Sun first, rather than the BBC and ITV, who would normally be quite friendly, but they were absolutely brutal. And she was looking around, and she did look completely lost, and hearing rumblings that, in fact, the press conference has made things worse. It was designed to steady the ship. But she does come across as very awkward. She's repeating the same phrases. She said, "We will get through this storm." Well, I remember she said that on the steps of Downing Street when she first came in, these same phrases. And what is the point of Liz Truss when a lot of her policies have been removed?
As you and I know, it's going to take more than phrases to deal with these issues, and we'll continue to discuss it later on in the show. We'll be looking much more at that news conference from Liz Truss and the dramatic replacing of Kwasi Kwarteng with Jeremy Hunt. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. It's a mixed picture this weekend. Sunshine and showers on Saturday. Most of us having a fine day on Sunday until some wet and windy weather arrives late on. It's a messy old pressure pattern as well. Low pressure systems up to the north, wiggling weather fronts down to the south and more weather fronts in between. Each of these will really just bring a band of showers across the country. In between those bands of showers, we've seen some fine and bright weather through the day today, but I think that most of the rain will tend to peter out this evening. We'll keep some showers going over Wales and the Midlands, and then later in the night some more wet weather will wash across Northern Ireland into parts of Scotland. Ahead of that, it'll turn quite cold with a touch of frost likely across eastern Scotland. Further south, it'll stay fairly mild. A bit of a mishmash then on Saturday morning. Some quite heavy downpours for northern England and southern Scotland initially, but they should ebb away quite smartly, and then we'll see some good spells of sunshine in the east. More showers then come in from the west, and a gusty, blustery wind blowing around these western coasts as well, making it feel quite cool. In the sunny spells, across East Anglia in the southeast, 16 or 17 is possible, but generally a little cooler than that. Some heavy rain for the Midlands, spreading into East Anglia in the southeast late in the day. More showers then for Scotland and Northern Ireland during Saturday night. It stays blustery. It'll be probably a milder night than tonight as well. And then into Sunday, well, actually the weather's starting to calm down. For most of England and Wales, a dry, bright day. Any early showers over northwest England should fade, and same goes for Northern Ireland. And even across Scotland, the showers tending to ease off through the day. So quite a bit of fine weather around on Sunday, and temperatures again getting into the mid to high teens. But down to the southwest, things are changing. A new low which will bring more wet and windy weather to Northern Ireland on Sunday evening and most places as we go through Sunday night.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne. At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. A reminder that Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has been sacked and replaced by Jeremy Hunt. And Liz Truss has made another major U-turn on her signature economic policy. Well, let's have a look at now the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng being doorstepped by journalists a short time ago.
By the Prime Minister.
Hello, thank you.
Should the Prime Minister go next, Mr. Kwarteng?
Hello. Good afternoon.
Not much clarity there, I'm afraid. He seems to be keeping his counsel to himself. But last Friday, the village of Creeslough in County Donegal was torn apart by an explosion at the local Apple Green filling station. Many people were injured, but 10 people, all from the local area, were killed, including a 5-year-old girl. Dougie Beattie, our GB Northern Ireland reporter, has been at the scene where there have been many funerals that still continue. Dougie.
Yes, Arlene, welcome to Creeslough. Indeed, you've just joined us after a few moments sort of memory of what was going on. It was this very time last week, in fact, this day last week, at this time, this road behind us would have resembled a battlefield. The Apple Green behind us exploded and took with it 10 people. Amongst the dead were 4 men, 3 women, 2 teenagers and 1 child. The 8th funeral was today. It was that of Hugh Kelly, a local farmer and builder. He was buried in St Michael's Church just round the corner from here. And the Bishop of Raphoe spoke to the local people about the feeling of survivors' guilt. And that follows priest John Joe Duffy earlier on in the week and other funerals, appealing to the community here to look for some sort of counselling as he would himself, because it has affected this very close-knit community that deeply. The last of the 2 funerals will take place tomorrow. That is of the youngest victim, Shauna Garway, and her father, Robert. She was only 5 years of age. They will also be laid to rest in the same St Michael's Church, just on the other side of the village. And the village here are now trying to come to terms with what's happening, but the shock has gone, the grief is definitely in, but the questions are now getting louder and louder as to what exactly happened and what was the cause of this. And unfortunately, we will probably not see that for about a year.
Creeslough is a small community. I think there's only about 400 people live in the village itself. This has been a monumental huge impact. It's bound to have a huge impact going forward on the community there. How do they deal with that, given that they are a small rural community? And it's interesting you say that the Bishop's talking about the fact that there needs to be well-being and resilience built up, given everything that has happened.
Well, they are looking for some sort of community to come together on a constant basis. And I mean, this village doesn't even have a community centre or some sort of hub for them. And I think that's the way they're going to try and do this. They're going to try and pull this community together to grieve with one another and to very much search for answers that way through the community, and remember the community, remember those people through themselves rather than through the media or anything else that comes along. I think that's where they're going and that's what they're looking for.
So much for joining us from Creeslough today. A heartbreaking story which happened just this time last week on the Friday. So after the break, more on yet another U-turn by Liz Truss. We'll speak to the great historian of Prime Minister, Sir Anthony Seldon. But first, here's your news headlines with Ray.
(3:33). I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says she isn't resigning, that as she announced yet another mini-budget U-turn to the nation. This time, Liz Truss is reversing the government's policy to scrap a planned rise in corporation tax. Her press conference came shortly after sacking Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor and replacing him with former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt. Ms Truss says she's still committed to her plans for growth and insists she'll, quote, always act in the national interest.
I have acted decisively today because my priority is ensuring our country's economic stability. As Prime Minister, I will always act in the national interest. This is always my first consideration. I want to be honest, this is difficult, but we will get through this storm, and we will deliver the strong and sustained growth that can transform the prosperity of our country for generations to come.
Royal Mail says it's planning to make up to 6,000 people redundant by next August after announcing losses of more than £200 million. The company says it started notifying workers of its plan, which aims to reduce its overall headcount by a total of 10,000. Royal Mail expects its full-year losses to reach £350 million. Detectives say the prime suspect in the murder of a woman who went missing 3 years ago in Milton Keynes killed himself in April 2019. 19-year-old Leah Croucher was last seen in February of 2019. Thames Valley Police launched a murder inquiry after finding human remains and personal items belonging to Leah in a house that the suspect was said to have been working at. Climate activists have been arrested after throwing soup at a Vincent van Gogh painting in London's National Gallery. Just Stop Oil staged the protest against fossil fuels by hurling tomato soup over Van Gogh's sunflowers and then gluing themselves to the wall. Police say the painting was undamaged as it's behind glass. And thousands of people across Australia's southeast have been told to leave their homes after 2 days of heavy rain caused flash flooding. Large parts of Victoria, southern New South Wales and parts of Tasmania saw more than a month's worth of rainfall over the last 48 hours. The heavy rain is expected to ease, but officials are warning that flooding could continue throughout the weekend. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to the briefing with Arlene Foster.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to the briefing. And Jeremy Hunt has been appointed the new Chancellor after Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked this afternoon. The former Health Secretary and Foreign Secretary and Tory leadership contender has now bagged the second most important job in the government. He supported Rishi Sunak during the leadership campaign, and his appointment seems like a move from the Prime Minister to bring those who supported her opponents into government. So I'm now joined by GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's in number 10, or outside number 10. He's not inside number 10, he's outside number 10, Downing Street. Tom, what do we know about Jeremy Hunt?
Yes, I have to say I was just inside number 9 Downing Street only a few minutes ago, because that's where the press conference was held. Unfortunately, only 4 questions were asked of the media, something that really irritated many of my colleagues in the parliamentary press lobby that were in attendance. We sat in sort of stunned silence after it ended after only 8 minutes. But yes, one of the announcements contained within that short press conference that the Prime Minister held was that Jeremy Hunt is the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's been on the back benches for some time now, chairing the Health and Social Care Select Committee. But of course he has himself stood to be leader of the Conservative Party not once but twice, back in the summer 2022 but also back in 2019. And interestingly, perhaps difficultly for this government, 2 of his key election pledges at each time, in 2022 and 2019, were to cut corporation tax, the tax that will be his first job as Chancellor to raise. In 2022, he suggested it should be cut to 15%, and in 2019, he suggested it should be cut to 12.5%, matching the Republic of Ireland for competitiveness, attracting inward investment. His argument was that if you follow something called the Laffer curve, there's a point at which cutting taxes may spur business, may spur investment, and may actually bring in more revenue. It's an argument that the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, used on Wednesday at the dispatch box of the House of Commons, saying that it would be wrong to raise corporation tax because keeping it low may well bring in more revenue for the government. So what a turnaround in just 2 days' time, to see the Prime Minister stand there at her lectern in the Downing Street briefing room, saying that in fact she will be raising corporation tax, doing precisely the opposite of what Jeremy Hunt, her new Chancellor, was suggesting we should do just 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Jeremy Hunt said we should cut corporation tax down to 15%. Now, precisely the opposite is happening. It's being raised from 19% to 25%. As the country enters a very difficult time, as the country faces recession-like conditions, as global growth is slowing, just as the country needs to attract inward investment, the country is now raising taxes, raising that tax burden that Liz Truss was elected to lower. I think in so many ways, this press conference today did not cauterise the issues that this government has. In some ways, it has now exacerbated them.
And Tom, it's interesting you say that, because we understand from many sources within the Conservative Party that a lot of the backbenchers and even some of the ministerial team think that the press conference was so bad that actually it has made things worse, if that were possible.
Yes, I've spoken to one member of Parliament who thought it was ill-judged. Others think that this is a very rocky time. However, I get the sense from members of Parliament I've spoken to today that there is not going to be a sudden move on Monday in the way that there perhaps was if we were having this discussion 3 or 4 hours ago. Perhaps what the replacement of the Chancellor has done is buy this government 2 weeks. Because something else that was mentioned in that press conference from the Prime Minister is that 31st of October announcement is still going ahead. The medium-term fiscal plan and its associated supply-side reform elements will be announced by the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, on the 31st of October. So perhaps this is all a bit of a gamble to buy that 2 weeks so that the party can't really throw too many rocks at the government. And of course, so many backbenchers have never supported Liz Truss from the get-go, have made it difficult for her to govern from the get-go. But perhaps this change in Chancellor buys those 2 weeks, enables Jeremy Hunt to deliver that medium-term fiscal statement on the 31st. And I suppose we'll see what the markets say about that when it happens.
Tom, thanks so much for joining us from Downing Street and bringing us up to date. Well, the events in Westminster have rather overshadowed the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill currently on its way through the House of Lords. Baroness Claire Fox, Director of the Academy of Ideas, was going to talk to me about that, and we're still going to talk about that, Claire. But I mean, surely you must be concerned about what's going on in Downing Street and the bubble of Westminster at the moment, because this is a national interest we're talking about.
I think that for those of us who are not particularly attached to either of the mainstream parties, one can only say that this proves, if anything, that the Conservatives, and I would actually say Labour as well, are just not fit for purpose. It's almost like we're watching the meltdown of mainstream political outlooks as we speak. It's not just a crisis for the Tories, it seems to me. And you'll hear people on all of the channels, people contacting this channel, phone-ins everywhere, just saying, I am absolutely politically homeless. What am I going to do? I mean, what are this shower up to? Without the leadership of the country, with people who seem to think that politics is some kind of a game that they don't have to involve the public in, because one of, I think, Liz Truss's major mistakes was they brought out those policies, whether for good or bad, it doesn't matter. It was like a little joke. They kind of like announced and went, look what we've done. Didn't even talk to their cabinet, didn't talk to backbenchers, and they certainly didn't talk to the public. Didn't try and persuade people.
No, the communications was completely
But it was
woeful.
there was something about that lack of communication, I think, that showed a contempt.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. But, I mean, you've been in the House of Lords this week talking about something else, which I would argue shows contempt for part of the United Kingdom, and that, of course, is the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. And there's been some of your colleagues in the House of Lords who have been trying to delay that bill and to stop it from going through. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we had an amendment to the Northern Irish Protocol Bill that was suggesting that it get delayed for 6 months, which would effectively be the end of the bill. I mean, that was what it was intended as, a massive fudge. The idea is to get rid of this bill because the reason put forward is that this is going to break and breach international law. There was huge amount of self-congratulatory back-patting, and they were all saying international law is the most important thing in the world. And a few of us pointed out that actually domestic law is quite important too, and that the main problem with the protocol, as you will know better than me, is that it's completely anti-democratic. It effectively cuts out the people of Northern Ireland from Brexiting. And the UK as a whole voted to Brexit. And this allows the European Court of Justice to have a say and a sway over UK affairs, with a particular denial of equal rights under the law to the people of Northern Ireland. Anyway, God, it was an annoying debate, Arlene. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, they're so pompous. I think that when we think about what's happening today, though, and this just seems to me to be very important, we're talking about a government in disarray.
Yeah.
We don't know what the legislative programme is going to be. I was anxious that Liz Truss was not entirely enthusiastically pushing this protocol bill, which would have allowed at least have an option to ensure that the EU didn't have sway over the 6 counties in Northern Ireland. Can you imagine she's concentrating on that? No. What I'm worried about is that the way that the country is being governed in general is going to be sacrificed on the back of skin saving. And we at the Academy of Ideas, we've got a big festival, Battle of Ideas. GBNews is involved this weekend. And we've got thousands of people who are going to be coming, hundreds of panel debates. And I'm saying that because I think that we actually have got to take back control of politics. That seems to me to be the only way that, and I don't mean we in the Lords, by the way. No, I mean, the public have got to now say, these politicians aren't fit for... You know, we've got to assert what we want and sort it out.
Well, we try to do this on the People's Channel.
I agree.
Claire, and we'll continue to do that. But it is worrying times because, of course, if the government falls apart, then that Northern Ireland Protocol will not go through and the people of Northern Ireland will be left in limbo. And what will a Labour government do?
Well, I can assure you...
the Northern Ireland Protocol?
I can assure you the Labour Party are not remotely interested, and this was obvious from the Lords, in ensuring that the people of Northern Ireland are honoured by the protocol.
Well, no devolution.
There won't be devolution. I know. That was what my point entirely. But in a way, I think what you could see was they didn't care.
Yeah.
And for all that Keir Starmer might say and assure us all, oh, don't worry, we've accepted Brexit. Let me tell you, if you're in the Lords, and I sit behind the Labour benches alongside Kate Hoey, actually, we kind of sit there to remind the Labour Party of who they should have represented, but they don't like that. But let me tell you, they are still anti-Brexit. And Jeremy Hunt.
Yes.
I'd just like to mention Jeremy Hunt. Not a man that I associate with believing in sovereignty, believing in the democratic vote of 2016, let alone the fact that he was very enthusiastic about the Chinese government's method of lockdown. So, you know, this is... And am I meant to feel reassured? And people tell me there's a grown-up in the room because Kwasi Kwarteng's been replaced by Jeremy Hunt. Scary times.
I share your concern. I'm worried about him being in such a powerful position, given his views in relation to Brexit, and he is a globalist. Let's be clear about that, Claire. Well, Claire, thanks for coming in.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
3 years on, then, since the disappearance of 19-year-old Leah, we're now going to go to Jack up in that area so that we can talk to him about what's going on there today. There's been some developments, Jack, hasn't there?
Yes, there has been. Just a couple of hours ago, there was a police press conference held by the Thames Valley Police with Detective Chief Superintendent Ian Hunter, and there have been some developments. The police have nominated a suspect in this case. His name is Neil Maxwell, but Maxwell was found dead on the 20th of April 2019, having taken his own life. Ian Hunter said at the press conference that it's unusual to name a suspect, but we've also learned this week that during the time when Leah went missing, the owner of the property was not in the UK, and Maxwell was the only person to have keys to the property. Of course, the property behind me was one that police were alerted to on Monday following a tip-off from the member of the public. We know that member of the public was commissioned by the owner of the property to carry out some maintenance works, and it's there that they contacted police about what they had found. We know that the police found possessions, Leah's rucksack and possessions of Leah, and human remains at the property. We now know that those remains were found in the loft, which is why the police say this case is so complex. Maxwell was employed by the homeowner to carry out some maintenance at the property and had keys to the property since November 2018. And the police say while he's been nominated as a suspect, this does not mean that he's guilty, and they will seek an open mind to gather the truth of this investigation. Maxwell does have previous sexual offences against females and was wanted in connection with a sexual assault in Newport Pagnell, also here in Milton Keynes, in November 2018, and police made 18 attempts to try and arrest him. However, he kept evading arrest by changing his name, changing his car, changing his phone number and location as well. In the course of visiting the 4,000 properties during the initial investigation, the Thames Valley Police admitted that they visited this property twice, but received no answer from the door because the homeowner does not live here at this address permanently. So they posted a leaflet, as they did with other houses that had no answer, and moved on. It was only Monday that they had actually connected this house with the investigation with Leah for the first time in those 3.5 years of searches. We know in those 3.5 years, 1,200 hours of CCTV footage had been reviewed, and also 4,000 houses had gone to door to door. The police had gone door to door to 4,000 houses. In a family statement, they said that the family said that we believe the police could not have done anything differently, and they've always approached every conversation with dignity and compassion, and the police continue to support them as these developments continue.
Jack, thank you so much for bringing us up to date with that very, very sad case there in Milton Keynes, and thank you for joining us. So now we're going to turn further afield to China. And this weekend, over 2,000 Chinese Communist Party officials gather in Beijing for the 20th Party Conference. The event is expected to be a coronation for President Xi Jinping, unprecedented third term, where he will tighten his control over the party and the Chinese state. Earlier this week, Jeremy Fleming, the director of GCHQ, also made warnings about China's growing influence, whilst The Sun reported China will be labelled a threat in the next strategic review. Well, joining me now is Professor Rana Mitter, who from the University of Oxford. Professor Mitter is widely considered one of the leading voices on China. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. So for our viewers and listeners, tell us what this Congress is really about and what they will do over the next few days.
Arlene, thanks for that. This Congress is essentially a chance for the Chinese Communist Party to lay out its programme for the next 5 years. Unlike British party conferences, for good or ill, there'll be no surprises there. Essentially, lots happening behind the scenes to fix some thoughts about the economy and China's foreign policy. And at the end, 7 men, it will almost certainly be 7 men, no women, will stand there in black suits, dyed hair, and they will be the next leadership of China, led by President Xi Jinping for the next 7 years. And all sorts of issues from Taiwan to whether China will open its borders and end its zero COVID policy. These are the things that will be in discussion behind the scenes at this Congress.
We know happens every 5 years. Normally, the General Secretary of the Communist Party only serves 2 terms. Isn't that right, Professor? And this is unprecedented because they're going to confirm that the President's going to continue for another term.
That's right. Really, since the 1970s, since the era of Chairman Mao, probably the most famous communist leader of the 20th century, because he went on and essentially caused a very destructive cultural revolution that nearly tore China apart, successive leaders decided that the maximum term that anyone could have was 10 years, two terms of 5 years, and that will be it. But Xi Jinping essentially had the constitution changed in 2018, and the party went along with that to allow him a 3rd term and indeed possibly a 4th term beyond that. Why was that? Well, essentially, there are a variety of long-term policies that he and the party want to get embedded, and he felt that he needed more time to do that. One is essentially to make China the dominant power in the Asia-Pacific region, essentially trying to push out the United States, which since World War II has been very, very powerful in that region, with allies like Japan, of course, alongside. And China basically wants to make sure that it can instead become the power that everyone picks the phone up to when a new government is formed in the region. In addition, Xi Jinping has talked more than once about the need to incorporate Taiwan, the island that split off at the beginning of the Cold War about 70 years ago. It's never been ruled by the mainland, by Beijing, but Xi Jinping regards that unifying it with the mainland is unfinished business of the Cold War. And we think that whether peacefully or through coercion, he would like to use some actions in the next 5 years or some period even beyond that to try and bring Taiwan under the rule of Beijing. So these long-term projects are some of the reasons why he's been given this extra term and will no doubt be there for quite some time to come.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Hopefully we can chat again about some of those threats, including zero COVID and the impact on the economy worldwide, and of course Taiwan as well. Well, you've been watching The Briefing with me. It's been one of those shows where we've been moving with events. The show's back every Friday from 3 p.m. And up next, it's Nana Akua.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. It's a mixed picture this weekend. Sunshine and showers on Saturday. Most of us having a fine day on Sunday until some wet and windy weather arrives late on. It's a messy old pressure pattern as well. Low pressure systems up to the north, wiggling weather fronts down to the south and more weather fronts in between. Each of these will really just bring a band of showers across the country. In between those bands of showers, we've seen some fine and bright weather through the day today, but I think that most of the rain will tend to peter out this evening. We'll keep some showers going over Wales and the Midlands, and then later in the night some more wet weather will wash across Northern Ireland into parts of Scotland. Ahead of that, it'll turn quite cold with a touch of frost likely across eastern Scotland. Further south, it'll stay fairly mild. A bit of a mishmash then on Saturday morning. Some quite heavy downpours for northern England and southern Scotland initially, but they should ebb away quite smartly, and then we'll see some good spells of sunshine in the east. More showers then come in from the west, and a gusty, blustery wind blowing around these western coasts as well, making it feel quite cool. In the sunny spells, of course, East Anglia in the southeast, 16 or 17 is possible, but generally a little cooler than that. Some heavy rain for the Midlands, spreading into East Anglia and the southeast late in the day. More showers then for Scotland and Northern Ireland during Saturday night. It stays blustery. It'll be probably a milder night than tonight as well. And then into Sunday, well, actually, the weather's starting to calm down. For most of England and Wales, a dry, bright day. Any early showers over northwest England should fade, and same goes for Northern Ireland. And even across Scotland, the showers tending to ease off through the day. So quite a bit of fine weather around on Sunday. And temperatures, again, getting into the mid to high teens. But down to the southwest, things are changing. A new low, which will bring more wet and windy weather to Northern Ireland on Sunday evening and most places as we go through Sunday night.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also entrepreneur, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, or car salesperson. Right, before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Coming up to 1 minute past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says she isn't resigning after announcing yet another mini-budget U-turn. This time, Liz Truss is reversing the government's policy to scrap a planned rise in corporation tax. Her press conference came shortly after sacking Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor and replacing him with former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt. Ms Truss says she's still committed to her plans for growth.
I have acted decisively today because my priority is ensuring our country's economic stability. As Prime Minister, I will always act in the national interest. This is always my first consideration. I want to be honest, this is difficult, but we will get through this storm and we will deliver the strong and sustained growth that can transform the prosperity of our country for generations to come.
In other news, detectives say the prime suspect in the murder of a woman who went missing 3 years ago in Milton Keynes has killed himself. 19-year-old Leah Croucher was last seen in February 2019 as she walked to work. Thames Valley Police launched a murder inquiry after finding human remains and personal items belonging to Leah in a house following a tip-off from a member of the public. The suspect, Neil Maxwell, was said to have been working at the property whilst the owners were away. Head of Crime Ian Hunter says Maxwell killed himself shortly after Leah died.
It is unusual to name a suspect, but we have also learned this week that during the time when Leah went missing, and whilst the owner of the property was not in the UK, Maxwell was the only person to have keys to that property. Whilst Maxwell has been nominated as a suspect, this does not mean he is guilty of any offence. We will keep an open mind, and our detailed investigation will seek to gather sufficient evidence to establish the truth.
2 climate activists have been arrested after throwing soup at a Vincent van Gogh painting in London's National Gallery. Just Stop Oil staged the protest against fossil fuels by hurling tomato soup over Van Gogh's sunflowers and then gluing themselves to the wall. The painting was undamaged as it's behind glass. The Met Police says both were arrested for criminal damage and aggravated trespass. In international news, the President of Ukraine is accusing the International Committee of the Red Cross of inaction in upholding the rights of Ukrainian prisoners of war. The criticism follows the death of more than 50 Ukrainian POWs in July due to an explosion at the Olenivka camp in Donetsk. Both sides have blamed each other for the blast. The Red Cross has previously tried and failed to obtain access to the camp. However, President Zelensky says they must try again.
There is Evlenica, in fact, a concentration camp where our prisoners of war are kept. Access to them must be provided, as it was agreed. The Red Cross can make it happen, but you have to try to make it happen. Ukraine is ready to facilitate this. The mission of the Red Cross can work based on the example of the IAEA mission, but it requires leadership. Conscientiousness is required.
You're watching GB News. We'll be back with more in a moment. Now back to Nana.
Right, well, this is GB News. We're going live now to Tom Harwood.
Hello, live from Downing Street. I have to say we are expecting the new Chancellor to arrive on this street imminently. I'll talk to you a little bit about the history of Jeremy Hunt, of course, a long-standing Member of Parliament. He's been in charge of many departments in government, from culture to health to being Foreign Secretary, of course, a path trodden as well by Liz Truss. Most recently, of course, he has been Chairman of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, and this was to some extent a surprise appointment from Liz Truss. Of course, Jeremy Hunt backed Rishi Sunak in the last leadership race. Indeed, he had a history of standing himself for the leadership of the Conservative Party as well. In 2019 and in 2022, Jeremy Hunt stood to become leader of the party on a platform not too dissimilar to that of Liz Truss. Even though Jeremy Hunt is seen to be on more of the One Nation side of the Conservative Party, he has in the past advocated radical tax cuts. In 2019, he advocated slashing the rate of corporation tax from 19% down to 12.5%, matching the Republic of Ireland and its tiger economy. In 2022, he stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party, advocating slashing the rate of corporation tax down to 15%. And now, appointed Chancellor, his first role, one of his first actions as Chancellor, will be to hike the rate of corporation tax from 19 to 25%. Quite the extraordinary about turn. Now, I'm just looking over my shoulder here because the assembled media, and indeed particularly photographers, are all itched, poised, ready to take pictures of whoever is about to arrive. It does look imminent, so I'll keep my eye on that for you, but for now, I'll hand back.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Tom. Wow, so we will be hearing very shortly exactly what's going on. I mean, it's just completely unbelievable what's happening, isn't it? It's like a bit of a mess. If you just join me, I'm Nana Akua. Joining me this afternoon is Christine Hamilton and also Danny Kelly. Wow. What
a day.
What a day. Are we dreaming?
In my view,
nightmare.
We can go back 6 to 9 months, and Boris Johnson was the goose that laid the golden eggs. And short-sightedly, plenty of his opponents, both within his party and more or less every MP outside, as Labour, Lib Dem, whatever, they wanted him gone. And because there was a moral dispute about Beergate and parties, etc., then his opponents within the party were forced to attack him. And we are now living in the consequences of that attack on Boris Johnson. The Conservative Party is in complete and utter turmoil, free fall. We have a sacking. I mean, those two, I thought those two were as tight as anything, Kwasi and Liz Truss. And the thing is, he was delivering on the policies of Liz Truss's personal manifesto. And I don't know what to say. I think the Conservative parties are in free fall.
Well, as you say, they were great mates, but greater love hath no woman than she lays down her friends for her life. She has pushed him under the bus to try and save her own skin, which is pretty extraordinary. The Tories have brought this upon themselves. I mean, I don't join this thing that they shouldn't have sacked Boris, because I honestly thought he had to go, and I don't think they'd be in a very good place now if we still had Boris. And don't forget, we've still got this Standards Committee thing coming down the line, which I don't think we should, but we have. Her problem is that she's got no mandate, she's got no majority, basically, because the MPs don't back her, and she's got no money. I mean, she's in a hell of a pickle. They don't want her, and they have it within themselves easily, frankly, to get rid of her.
Well,
and then where will we be?
Well,
as Prime Minister.
Yes, well, where will we be indeed? We'll stay with us.
Rishi.
Well, I think that's what they want.
It is what they want, yes, exactly. they didn't want Liz, and they made sure that the one they put up against Rishi was the one that they didn't think that the Tory voters would go for, and of course they did. They should have gone for Penny Mordaunt, and then we'd have been sailing.
God, no, what Penny Mordaunt? The one that got confused with the woman?
Not Penny Mordaunt, Kemi Badenoch.
Sorry,
I'm in such a muddle. Kemi Badenoch. Jeremy Hunt got 18 votes in the first time round, so he's popular with his comrades.
I mean, this is quite ridiculous. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, I think what it is that he was probably the only one that was prepared to do the job. I think the others would have gone, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I don't fancy that one. That's like a hot potato. Who wants one of those? Yeah. You know, frankly, or probably you want one of those, Danny. I'm talking about potatoes and food. I can see
I love the hot
you're salivating already.
I do, with lots of butter.
Stop it, you're making me feel hungry. What I find so extraordinary, and I never would have thought this about Liz Truss hitherto, but there's arrogance there. Her and Kwasi Kwarteng, they just thought that they didn't need to explain it to people. Look at her press conference just now, 8 minutes, 21 seconds.
I don't blame her, though. The questions that they were asking were pathetic. I mean, there was that question from what's his name that wears the funny socks.
But she should have spent longer explaining
what's his name? ITV, Peston.
That did.
I mean, what did he say? He said she has trashed the economic competence of the party and asking her to apologise. He asked her to apologise. Well, I can tell you now that Jeremy Hunt is actually just on his way. He's just entered number 10 and he's just walked in. So I think he'll be out shortly because he'll be talking to us and we'll be listening to what he has to say because he is now obviously the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. How many have they been through in the last, how many weeks?
3 in the last 5 or 6 weeks. May I commend you as well for not mispronouncing Jeremy's surname as well. Lots of broadcasters have failed at that rather simple
I have to
task.
concentrate.
It was John Humphreys,
one of the finest
wasn't it?
broadcasters in the UK.
And you yourself as well, you managed it too.
That's not a challenge for you, is it? Easy.
But Jeremy Hunt, now, to be honest, I heard him on one of the radio stations. He took over the show for a couple of hours. And I listened, because usually I think he looks a bit menacing in some ways. I don't like his policies. We would still probably be in lockdown if he wanted us to go the full way like China. Didn't they cement people's doors in China? They did if they had COVID. I think it was something like that. I'm being serious. But he didn't say that. But, you know... But what I'm saying about him is that when I listened to him on this particular radio programme, he actually came across OK. Because somebody had called in and they were talking about Boris Johnson and and they were actually being quite sort of derogatory about Boris. And he, in the middle, he said to them, can I ask you how you voted? Then they obviously said they voted Labour anyway. Yeah. So he went, well, then I'm not surprised at what you're saying. I wouldn't expect. So he was actually quite defensive towards Boris. So I, for that moment, I thought, maybe he's not as bad as he seems.
That's very insightful, because what we're getting at is we need to give people a chance. We need to give people an opportunity. Politics is so pathologically tribal nowadays that even though Boris Johnson, for all of his faults, say, for example, one of Boris Johnson's opponents, you say, well, look, the great thing about Johnson is that he got the early vaccine rollout, and they won't accept it. It's so tribal. It's so pathologically, in my view,
Well, listen, we're going to talk a lot more about the party and find out exactly what I go on in my monologue, which is on the way next. So it's fast approaching 13 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So here we are, the sacrificial lamb, Kwasi Kwarteng. I mean, they got rid of Boris because of COVID and cake, a cake which, by all counts, it was reported he didn't actually eat. Many watching around the world found this a nonsensical, almost laughable reason, getting rid of a leader for breaking a silly rule that his civil servants made up and clearly didn't brief him properly on and broke themselves. And people lost loved ones, so they blamed Boris for the rules that they probably also broke without even realising. Then there was that interminable political vacuum which a load of hopefuls started to chuck their hat into. Yes, of course, the leadership challenge. None of them with anything close to the charisma, energy and leadership that Boris commanded. Among them, Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch both came across well but couldn't garner enough support. Tom Tugendhat, who couldn't stop banging on about serving people. Then there was Penny Mordaunt, who got caught in the gender debacle. Dishi Rishi pretty much blew his chances by mansplaining and coming across as smarmy in the leadership debates. And then there was Liz Truss, the best of some pretty slim pickings. The quality I liked the most about Liz Truss was that she showed complete loyalty to Boris Johnson. Many saw her as a continuity-type character. On a wave of support from those who were still upset about Boris, the Tory party members gave Liz the majority, to the annoyance of, it would seem, the majority of MPs. They wanted Rishi. Liz Truss appointed a diverse cabinet and Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor. His first real test, his fiscal event, well, it caused, what can we call it, a storm? The pound plunged to an all-time low, although it did recover, but not after a load of city types made a lot of money out of the chaos. They were both pursuing the same policies, and apart from the top rate of tax that didn't go down well, there wasn't much else wrong with the budget. But it seems a load of MPs still wanted Rishi. The writing was clearly on the wall when loyal Liz Truss U-turned on reducing the top rate of tax and refused to back her Chancellor, and she sacked him. Now, in a letter, Kwasi Kwarteng wrote, "Dear Prime Minister, you've asked me to stand aside as your Chancellor. I've accepted. When you asked me to serve as your Chancellor, I did so in full knowledge that the situation we faced was incredibly difficult, with rising global interest rates and energy prices. However, your vision of optimism, growth and change was right." He went on to say, "We have been colleagues and friends for many years in that time. I have seen your dedication and determination. I believe your vision is the right one. It has been an honour to serve as your first Chancellor. Your success is this country's success, and I wish you well." He clearly didn't see it coming.
You'll be Chancellor and Liz Truss will be Prime Minister this time next month?
Absolutely, 100%. I'm not going anywhere.
I put it to you that Kwasi Kwarteng was the sacrificial lamb. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to let the voters decide in a general election? From the